In this video we're going to look at some principles for good practice. But before we start, I want to make it clear that this isn't a comprehensive list that we're going to go through. These are some of the main principles, but of course, there will be others as well. This list is just the fruit of my personal experiences and studies. Let's get started with looking at the first of these principles. The first one is one that I already touched on earlier, which is to identify strong points to build on and areas of development to build up. If we come back to this theme, that what are optimal outcomes, helping the person being appraised to be the best worker they can be to achieve the best results. Then there are two sides to this. It's looking at what are they already good at. And let's not rest on our laurels and look at how would you get even better. How do you bring about further improvement in the areas where they're already good, where they're already strong? But then, of course, nobody's perfect. We all have areas for development. We all have areas where we can improve. So, that's where we do the building up. We identified the strong points to build on to make them even stronger. We identify those areas for development, to build them up, to look for improvement. So, in both cases, what we're looking at is making improvement, developing progress in terms of achieving the best results we can. Helping this person to be the best worker they can be. Because of course, everybody benefits from that. They do, and the person doing the appraising does, the organization does, the people that the organization serves benefit from this. Everybody benefits. So, it's an important thing to bear in mind. Identify strong points to build on and areas for development to build up. This will take you a long way in terms of effective practice, in terms of appraisal. Then, it's also important to link with supervision. So, ideally what should happen is appraisal identifies strong points to build on areas for development to build up, and then as supervision continues throughout the year until the next appraisal meeting. The issues that have been discussed in appraisal are addressed through supervision. So, supervision on an ongoing basis is a way of reminding yourselves what those strong points are and how they can be made even better, and looking at those areas for development to build them up. So this should be this sort of constant to and from between supervision and appraisal. Appraisal, in a sense, sets the agenda to a certain extent. Now, of course, in supervision it won't simply be what's been identified in appraisal. There will be other issues to discuss as well, of course. But the connection between appraisal and supervision must be seen as two sides of the same coin. So, that's an important second principle to link appraisal with supervision. Then another principle to emphasize is this idea of involving the employee. You're working in partnership. It's very easy for people to fear from appraisal as something that's done to them, rather than with them. So, if it's seen as a positive process of helping to achieve the best results, to make the best progress in terms of their development and their capabilities and so on, then an employee should actually be welcoming appraisal. If it's something they feel is done to them, there's no element of partnership. They are just being told in a sense where they're going wrong. Then, they're going to resent it. It's not going to be a positive, constructive process. So in terms of a return on investment from human resources, it's actually counterproductive when that happens. So, make sure that the process is done in partnership. It's basically about people coming together to look at how can we help to get the best results, positive constructive process from start to finish. There is nothing to be afraid of, nothing to resent or fear, and very positive process if it's done properly. Now, what should happen actually in an appraisal meeting? There should be a review of the past year and a plan developed for the coming year. That's on the basis that each 12-month appraisal period you're using. Obviously, if it's a 6-month appraisal period, then you review the past 6 months and plan for the coming 6 months. So, the basic idea is to say how the last 6 or 12 months have gone. Review that and highlight the key points from it that we can learn from. And then look at the coming 12 months. What needs to happen? What do we need to focus on? What are the important issues we need to bear in mind? And so on. All within this basic framework of helping to achieve the best results, to help the person being appraised to be the best worker they can be. So, review the past year and plan for the coming year is another important principle here. It's about drawing out the key points from the process. So, if there hasn't been a previous year, for example, if this is a new employee, it's the beginning of an appraisal process in a sense, then this should be part of induction. So, linking in with the point I made earlier about supervision, basically what should happen is when a new person is appointed, they go through an induction period. As part of that induction, they have strong points are identified, areas for development are identified, and building up is part of it. Supervision then takes place until the first appraisal meeting is held, where the period between induction and the appraisal meeting are reviewed and plans are drawn up for the coming year. What we also need to bear in mind as a key principle is it's important to be positive and constructive. Whether somebody has been doing well or whether they've been struggling with their work, in some respects it doesn't matter in the sense that we need to be positive and constructive. The process is not one of attributing blame. It's not one of criticizing people in a harmful or destructive way. It's not about undermining confidence. It's not about putting people in their place or anything like that. Although sadly, there have been several examples over the years where the process has been unhelpful. It's been negative and destructive. So, throughout, we need to bear in mind this has to be positive and constructive. Otherwise, it is going against what appraisal is all about in terms of achieving the best results. What will help with this is basically this principle of building on and building up. If there are issues where a person has been not performing as they should, there are aspects of their work that they've struggled with. There are issues that need to be addressed. Then, this can be done in a positive, instructive, and constructive way. What we're doing is not trying to penalize them for not doing what we'd hoped they'd be able to do. We're not in any sense punishing them for disappointing us in terms of their standards of work. It's about helping them to raise those standards of work where necessary. So, make sure that we're being clear. What exactly is considered as a problem and what is to be done about that? What positive steps can be made to move forward in terms of achieving the best results and helping the person become the best worker they can be? What can also be helpful, where possible, and I emphasize where possible, because I know it isn't always possible, is to use what's known as the grandparent model. It's not an ideal term, but it is the one that tends to be used. What that means is that appraisal should involve obviously the person being appraised by their line manager, and then their line manager's line manager, where possible. The reason for this is that if the line manager is working with the employee on a day-to-day basis, then they can get close to that person. They can get in a situation where they have formed their own views of that person and they may find it difficult to see the bigger picture, whereas somebody who hopefully knows the employee, but not involved with them on a day-to-day managerial basis, that is this grandparent model, then he or she can offer a more objective view, can offer a broader view of the situation, and can therefore help the process be constructive. And a sort of a variation on the theme is whereby the line manager's line manager cannot be involved for any reason, but where another line manager who doesn't work directly with the person being appraised is involved. So again, he or she provides some element of distance, some element of objectivity, some way of seeing the bigger picture and helping both the employee and the line manager to move forward constructively in terms of whatever the issues are that need to be addressed. What can also be helpful again, where possible, is to use 360-degree appraisal. What that refers to is not just being the employee being appraised from above by line manager or line manager's line manager, but all round. So, asking colleagues to contribute and to give views on what's it like to work with this person. But then if that person is in a supervisory role and now being appraised, then what about the people they supervise? What are their views of how well this person is doing? What their strong points are to build on, their areas of development to build up? If it involves direct work with clients or customers or whatever, then what do they have to say about this process? I want to emphasize 2 points. One is that this can be more time-consuming to bring in that information from these various sources. But because of that, and because you've got so much more information, then it can be a richer process. It can actually produce better results. The other point I want to emphasize is that it has to be handled sensitively. It is something that can be seen as quite threatening, for example, to be told that not only are you going to get feedback from your line manager's line manager, but also from other people as well. Then, what tends to happen is where colleagues are asked for their opinions is they tend to be very supportive of one another, which to a certain extent can be expected and valued. It's about good teamwork, but it can actually lessen the value of the feedback. For example, if there's a particular employee who struggles with X, Y, or Z, but none of their colleagues are prepared to say, actually, then that causes problems. So, clearly, the quality of the feedback, the effectiveness of the feedback is undermined to a certain degree. Whether or not you choose to use 360-degree appraisal, of course, it is a decision to be made by the management team, but it is something that, when used, can add extra dimensions to an appraisal process. And last, but not least, it is the importance of setting realistic goals. So, whether you are using the target-based approach and you are identifying specific targets to be met, or you're taking more developmental approach of setting goals rather than targets. So, it's not something that can be measured, but it's just a developmental process of the goal rather than to achieve a figure. Either way, it's got to be realistic. The reason for this is basically around a psychological concept called creative tension. What creative tension refers to? If I am able to achieve a certain level of work and I'm asked to raise that to a realistic level, the difference between my level of performance now and what's expected of me is manageable, then that's going to motivate me, more than likely, to try and achieve those and that development to achieve that progress. But if the gap between my level of performance now and what's expected of me is huge, then that's likely to demotivate me. It's likely to create extra pressure. It can undermine my confidence and make me feel that I'm not being appreciated, that I'm undervalued, that I'm being asked to do something that is just not helpful. So, instead of appraisal being a positive and constructive process, it then becomes quite a negative undermining, a difficult process that is counterproductive. It prevents us from achieving optimal outcomes. So, when you've finished reviewing the previous year or 6 months, and you're planning for the next setting goals, all targets can be very helpful, but they must be realistic. It's no good setting idealistic goals. It's no point saying, ideally, we would like you to achieve A, B, C. We think it is realistic for you to achieve X, Y, Z, and we will support you in doing so. Then, it is a positive, constructive process. It's a helpful process. It will play a positive part in terms of achieving the best outcomes, achieving the best results, helping them to be the best worker they can be. So, as I said, that's not a comprehensive list, and these aren't the only principles of good practice. But hopefully they've given you plenty of food for thought.